A few nights ago, Donald Trump won the election to become the next US president. And I was really curious, what does that mean for the truck market? What's going to happen in the future? And that'd be interesting to look back to the past. Hey, it's Tim, Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. This idea woke me up at 4 o'clock this morning, to be honest with you. And I thought about it for hours and hours and hours. And then I decided to get it out of my system and let it go. So I wrote an article up on pickuptrucktalk.com. Well, look, I can write and do video. Look at that, snazzy. And we talked in in the article about what does it mean. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through what I found, what my thought processes are on what it's going to be for a Trump presidency. And I'm going to make this very clear. He won. Okay, fantastic, whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters to me is what's going to impact you, the consumer. That's what got me thinking about this. I was thinking, what if you came to me and said, Tim, should I buy a truck today or should I wait till after he's inaugurated? What does next year look like? Is next year a better year to buy trucks than this year is? And that's what got me thinking. What are you going to do as a consumer with this change? US president elections typically have a big change in the market. Stock market goes crazy a couple days. Economy goes weird. Everything it's just a weird time for the United States. And so, should you wait till the year, buy it this year, or buy it next year? So let's talk about this in non-political terms. Let's just have a good conversation. And remember, I went to college as a journalist. I have a journalism degree right over there. Interestingly enough, I have a minored in political science. So this kind of fits both of my interest levels. That's what got me fired up. So let's on the website. I'll put a link to the article down below. If you don't watch me do this video and you want to just read it instead, hey, have at it. I'm not gonna begrudge you for that, but it's right here. I took a picture of a Ram truck. The picture doesn't matter. I just was trying to find a photo, and I kind of picked it because it's new powertrain and it's the tungsten level, which is the highest trim level, which I think is really interesting for this whole story. So what I want to get to start this off was where is the U.S. truck market today? Okay, because I think this is important because people are going to look at stuff and say, "Oh, Trump did this or Trump did that or whatever." And he's going to claim a bunch of stuff like all politicians do, and sometimes you should, do good things. But how did we get where we are 30, 40 years ago to today? I find a lot of consumers come to me, they've never bought a new truck, they don't understand what's going on in the marketplace, or there's like, what happened? I've looked at trucks for years, and all of a sudden they've blown up and they're big and they're monstrous things. And if you don't understand where we are, how we got to today, and what laws got us to that place, you may not understand what the changes are happening through the Trump presidency and what that's going to impact in the future. So we need to understand what's going on. So I broke this down into talking about some key changes that happened over the years. I said they changed in three key ways: vehicle size, powertrain, and cost. Thanks in part to some tax loopholes. So what we're talking about here, vehicle size, right? So the first thing is vehicle size. What does that matter? Well, back when President Bush, the son, was in office, I think it's 43, whatever it was. I was in college then, and I watched what he was doing because I'm a political science kind of guy. But back when he was in office, he was coming up with cafe adjustments, okay? New rules for automakers. And then Obama took office and took Bush's ideas next level. They made a key change into vehicle size. If you don't know what CAFE is, it's Corporate Average Fuel Economy. They are rules that are co-authored by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. So they come together these rules and they get public input. They get stakeholder input from the automakers. They talk to the people of groups, of nonprofit groups that either advocate for these technology or cleaner earth like Sierra Club, that kind of stuff. They bring all these people together and then they look at the European rules, Euro 6 rules, and they bring those rules in. They have this whole conversation. And they create these documents that I think my record's about 4 cups of coffee. This is what I have to do to read these things because they're multi-pages full of government speak. Now, I have read every CAFE law as much as I can, going back to Bush. So I've read them all. And this law came out during the oil embargo back in the 70s. The idea was we need to get vehicles that are more fuel efficient because we don't want to rely on foreign oil. We want to be able to be more self-sufficient of our oil produced in the United States, which produce a lot of it. And we want to make sure that we have better national security. We're not relying on them for oil. And so over the years, this has turned into setting both a mile per gallon goals for automakers to achieve, and that's related to emissions. So what happens here is when you have a vehicle and you burn fuel in the combustion chamber, You're actually burning off the residue of that is carbon. And the more carbon you produce becomes CO2, which is what the automakers and lawmakers globally are basing the emission standards on. So you have fuel economy equals emissions and in the end, CO2 output. So that's why they kind of link together. So what happened was during the Obama years in 2012, he said we're going to have this fuel economy standards be 54.1 mile per gallon, something like this, and it was shocked everybody and made huge headlines. Well, a key change in the Obama era rule was looking at vehicles in a different way. It used to be passenger cars were one thing and trucks were another thing and different categories. They said, you know what, for anything that's below 8,500 pounds, which is basically a 3/4 ton and 110 or above that, that are considered commercial vehicles, anything below that, we're going to judge a different way. We're going to judge it on footprint. And the idea here is you take the inside of the tires, front and rear, and you draw a rectangle. Whatever mathematical figures that out. Not good at math at all, by the way. Whatever you do, plus, minus, that happens. That's your overall vehicle footprint. And then they started basing some emissions rules on overall footprint. And they had different footprints and different things that make for fuel economy. And the idea back then, as I remember Obama stating very clearly, was that people will be focused on buying vehicles that are good for their self-interest. And the assumption was everybody's self-interest should be in transportation, getting the best fuel economy. So when you buy a vehicle, you should be looking at only the best fuel economy. That was the thinking back then. Well, we know that that really isn't what people do. People tend to buy vehicles for all sorts of different reasons and desires and wants and needs. And it doesn't matter. People buy for all different reasons. They don't always buy just based on fuel economy as number one, especially in the truck market. We have different needs out there. And so what automakers started realizing as well was, hey, vehicle size. So if I build a Tahoe this big, I have to get better fuel economy than I build a Tahoe this big. So I can go bigger with the footprint of the vehicle and I'll have to be as stringent for fuel economy. Huh. So if I go small car, it's got to have that 54 mile per gallon. That's going to be massive. I have to do hybrid, I have to do plug-in hybrid, I have to do EV, something. You can't build a V6 in a car and get that, right? But they said, hey, with trucks and things, I can go better fuel economy because the width and height and length of the vehicle doesn't always matter when it comes to fuel economy. We're looking at mass and weight and things like that matter. More than that, sometimes aerodynamics do matter as well. That's why a lot of trucks look the same these days. They've all been through the same wind tunnels. But they said, okay, we can get to that point if we do the vehicle footprint. And so that's what we did. So vehicles got bigger through footprint. And so that's why when you go look at a new truck these days, you're like, oh my gosh, the bed's tall and all this kind of stuff's tall. Well, if you make the vehicle wider and longer, you tend to make it taller. Americans want more headroom. They want more headroom in the cabins. That goes taller. And then you got to raise the bed up where you have this really weird truck with a really low bed and people just didn't like that. So they made it all taller. So everything's gotten bigger, right? And then we had powertrain changes, right? So what over the years has happened is the EPA has different cycles. They cycle in new rules over 5, 6, 7 years. The idea behind that is not making a lot of massive changes all up front, but making incremental changes long term. Not speaking well tonight. Make changes in a long-term manner so they don't disrupt the market so badly, and they make these changes happen in increments. That's what I'm trying to say, increments. And so we saw powertrain changes in that we started seeing more turbocharged engines come back to the marketplace. They had been out in the 70s and 80s and weren't very good, and consumers didn't like them, so nobody pushed for those. And then they came back in the 2000s. What the 40 Coupe has been out for probably 2012. They've been out there for over a decade now, and people start going, you know what? Pretty good power. I can get some good fuel economy if I stay off the gas pedal, and it's quicker because a turbocharged engine is quicker than the gas engine, naturally aspirated gas engine offline. So they're liking that. Now, people tend to view this as the EPA telling automakers you have to build turbocharged engines. That's never been the case. The EPA sets the fuel economy numbers and says, okay, automakers, you've told us you can hit these numbers, have at it. And then automakers decide what they're going to do. That's why in the marketplace, you see a lot of different things. You'll see Toyota, who killed the V8. You'll see Ram, who's killing the V8, or Stellantis actually overall. Then you see Ford keeping the V8, but like GM, it's got cylinder deactivation, so it makes an 8-cylinder and 4-cylinder. And then in GM's case, they take an 8-cylinder and make it like a 1-cylinder. So we have all these different technologies and things the automakers have rolled out in years that they've agreed to make changes to the overall emissions from a global level. Okay, that's why I think the next duty cycle is in 2027, making small changes. Gasoline particulate filters is one of the big changes. The size of the catalytic converter is another change. So nothing really major because we've made these changes over the last couple of decades. So that's why you go to marketplace now and you say, man, I want a regular cab, short bed V8. You're like, why doesn't it exist? Well, you have vehicle footprint and you have change in emissions. And then the third thing you have is you have changes to tax loopholes and things. Section 179 came out to help small businesses buy equipment. It's become the Hummer tax loophole in many cases because the idea here is that businesses can write off that vehicle. It used to be they take a 5-year depreciation cycle. A couple years ago, they changed that to be you can depreciate as much as you want in the first year. And so the Hummer tax loophole said if you have a vehicle that's bigger, that weighs over 8,500 pounds, or excuse me, 6,000 pounds, and use it only for business, you can write that off. And so a lot of small businesses were going, well, why not just buy a new vehicle and call it my work vehicle and use it for work all the time? Because I'm already doing that anyways, like I do. Vehicles I get that I buy, not the vehicles I review, are work vehicles because I use them for work. So that was another big change. Okay, so that kind of drove people to say, all right, I can write this stuff off. And they started saying, well, wait a minute, if I buy a more expensive vehicle and I have more to write off, then I'll save more on taxes if I do my taxes a certain way, right? And there's a lot of tax accountants out there that do whatever they want to argue different things. But if you decide to buy a vehicle consistently and swap them over, then eventually it works for you. You're kicking the can down the curb for taxes, because eventually you have to pay that back, but allows you to buy that more expensive vehicle because of cost benefit there. And that's why we're seeing ranchers and farmers driving King ranches. You want to see where the money's going for that kind of stuff? Go to Cheyenne Frontier Days, which is a big out west rodeo in Cheyenne. You're going to see some rigs that cost $250,000 and more, and these are trucks. And these are trucks with the trailers because they're small businesses, and they get the write-offs. So this is a big deal. So that's why you're seeing that. You're also seeing a changing the customer. Used to be work truck guys. They want work trucks, right? And that's always going to be. But as people have evolved, as society has changed, people want the versatility of a truck, but they want to give up their amenities. So you're seeing these high-end luxury trucks on the marketplace. Well, that's another change. So we have bigger vehicles, variety of powertrains, and we have more luxury. And that also, you'll see that in changes that have happened, who was in charge. Okay. So I talk about footprint. I talk about the things. Sorry, this is like a 2,000-word article. I'm trying to make it as fast as I can to get through this. And so what the Trump presidency can change in this is what's going to happen. Look at the prior administration. They proposed rolling back some of the Obama era CAFE rules with just a modest improvement in fuel economy. The SAFER, which is the Safe Vehicles Rule, was finalized on May 31st, 2020, in the final months of Trump's first term. Okay, so what does this mean? A lot of people in this channel will put comments down below where Trump needs to abolish the EPA and get rid of the whole thing. Well, I don't really think that that's going to happen because that's a Republican hallmark going all the way back to Richard Nixon. Okay, he's put people in charge who have been anti-EPA and hasn't really worked out because the rules have still been in place. His Safe Car Act, the idea behind it was to roll back some of the higher Obama era emission standards and make it less stringent to hit those with modest changes in overall corporate fuel economy. So the big ones, it's like 1.5% gain instead of saying 10% gain. The challenge with that, and I think that's where we're not going to see many changes, is automakers had already planned to hit the Obama era standards. So whatever Trump had done there to roll those back to say, hey, we don't need to turbocharge stuff. We want to make sure a little bit cheaper for consumers, which is not a bad ploy to go. It didn't matter because automakers were already moving forward. For example, the 2022 Tundra, like I referenced earlier, came out with a 3.5, they call it 3.4 liter now, V6, twin turbocharged, or a hybrid version. No V8. That decision was made during the Trump years. When Trump got elected, they had started making those decisions happen. And so these automakers do things in 7-year cycles for vehicles, and they'd make plans going up to a decade, especially with powertrains. Look at the Hemi engine. It's discontinued from Ram. That engine has been out for more than a decade. All right. They came with Hurricane engine while Biden was in office. You can say, well, Biden caused this and his missions caused this. But the reality is they came with this idea in the last years of Trump's administration. that they needed engine for a global marketplace. Now we see that as well in different things. I'm going to my screen back, make sure I go through all my points here. So I don't think we're going to see anything changes with the cafe numbers. And again, the next generation cafe rules that are already kind of being argued about and putting in place are making small changes. Catalytic converter, you're looking at the gasoline particulate filters, which is same as a diesel particulate filter as well. Those changes are going to happen. Okay. And the other thing that interesting with this deal was that unfortunately, Trump's rule came out May 31st, 2020, in the final months of his first term in office. Within a year, basically, the Biden administration changed the rules back. So, from an automaker standpoint, you can't just change your entire product cycle sequence when you work on 7 years to a decade with a changing president who makes changes that quickly. So that's why a lot of automakers didn't make many changes at all when Trump was in office. They followed their own plan. I talked about the Ram and the Stellantis and also the Tundra. And then we had Ford, talked about that. Ford offers a 5-liter V8, but they had to do cylinder deactivation now. And then they offered a supercharged V8 in Raptor R. It's $30,000 more than the regular 3.5 liter comes in a Raptor. So they're making you pay for this quite a bit. And the 5-liter V8 is only used in certain trims. Most trims cost in the lineup as far as XLT and Lariat and XL, not top trims like King Ranch and Platinum. Those are only the 3.5 liter high output versions of those powertrains in those offerings. And the SUVs like the Ford Expedition, no V8 anymore. So V8s have gone away in certain segments because in those segments, it's not about towing. It's not about the overall V8 performance. It's about better fuel economy, better response off the line with these bigger vehicles. GM has the biggest lineup of V8s out there, but they also have a 2.7 liter turbocharged engine, a 3-liter Duramax diesel. I've talked about a lot in this channel, and they use them in Tahoe and Yukon. But also, like I said earlier, they can make these V8s run in like one cylinder. So that's how they got to run to it. So we talked about future cafe rules probably won't happen because rolling back so quickly. And another thing that's happening is you're seeing over the past decade, automakers become really reluctant to make changes like that because they've been focusing on the commonality of parts approach to speed up production, reduce quality issues, and cut expenses. So the idea here is automakers want to make one door latch mechanism behind the door for 20 different vehicles globally because it saves them money, gets the parts suppliers, build them at higher quality. They can control quality and recalls. Start recalls. They can control recalls because now they're building these parts at a very massive scale with less issues. When you make a variety of vehicles, different shapes, different styles, all different parts, you have a lot of balls in the air, right? So we're seeing this powertrains too. That's why we're seeing globalization of powertrains. Okay. And so if they decide to roll back some of Biden's most stringent cafe rules, the odds are automakers already meet or exceed that. They don't really care, like I talked about earlier. And probably next administration can change it quite a bit because right now Republicans and Democrats are as far apart as I've ever seen in my life. A little bit of manufacturing. This is a big topic that comes up. We just had the news. Stellantis is moving some production to Mexico, the Ram 1500. We don't know exact numbers. People are saying it's all ICE vehicles, which is all the gas vehicles that they built for the Ram. I've talked to Ram CEO. She says it's not that. It's just a relief valve. They want to increase production globally. We don't know the truth yet. We'll find the truth in the next couple of years, whatever. So you're saying, well, what about manufacturing? What's Trump going to do here? Is he going to bring back those U.S. jobs from China? I was in Michigan this year for a variety of different reasons, watching the battleground state play out these issues, and I just had to chuckle at some of these politicians because they clearly don't know what's going on. So what about manufacturing? So where does manufacturing currently stand? What's going on? So this is a chart that I found. I will zoom in for you guys. This is a chart that shows manufacturing and dealers since 2010. It's a government chart, the Government Bureau of Land Statistics that does this chart. Is that video is getting maybe confusing you. I'm trying to get this in your screen the best you can. So this chart looks at dealership jobs, auto manufacturing jobs, and the grand scheme. We can see it's basically gone up since 2010 and had one little blip in 2020 during COVID years. But U.S. manufacturing, as far as automotive industry jobs, has been pretty strong. The data shows that. Now, we're also seeing some changes, right? So we're seeing that, I'm going to go up here for a minute. We've seen that Rivian reopened a shuttered Mitsubishi plant in Normal, Illinois. We saw that Ram is Stellantis will reopen the Belvidere, Illinois plant to build a midsize truck. We know that in Canada, GM took away a plant that's going to be built for EVs only, built more trucks. right? So we're seeing an increase in plants and we're seeing an increase in manufacturing jobs. We're also seeing automakers have spent trillions, I'm saying trillions, new electric vehicle factories, battery plants, investing in US manufacturing of semiconductor chips. Semiconductor chips were primarily built overseas. Singapore was a big place, and Singapore and China were big places for the semiconductors. And now they want to build that stuff more in the United States and not have such a crunch in supply chain if those semiconductors aren't produced. So we're seeing manufacturing grow already. This is happening, right? And we're seeing it expand, and it's getting bigger and bigger as more auto aftermarket companies as well get involved. Jill and I went and saw Bilstein it was a year ago. I went to Fort Wayne Assembly last year. I've talked to small mom and pop places. I've also talked to other big aftermarket companies like Rough Country that's completely expanded in the last 5-10 years. They've blown apart in as far as how much they carry, how big of a company they are. So we're seeing a big explosion in automotive manufacturing currently. And we're seeing that things are going to change. Now, we also, like I talked about, we talked about how Ram is going there. Toyota Tacoma now is all produced in Mexico. GM announced it will change the Canadian plant. And so, why aren't there those plants in the United States? Why don't we have no Mexican plants? Well, we have, it's cheaper to build in Mexico, right? The average worker there makes 1/10 the income of a U.S. unit auto worker. Okay. So, if you're a manufacturer and you're saying, boy, I want to make some profit on these vehicles, where do I build at? Well, you build in Mexico. This was 1/10, right? And you're able to do that because of the NAFTA agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed years ago, which has been amended in the prior Trump administration. So they updated it, renamed it the United States Mexico Canada Agreement. This allows automakers to build vehicles in Mexico and Canada, United States. And the idea here is it gives them more flexibility. They can build different places. And all those places that they build those trucks are exempt from a chicken tax tariff. I'll get more tariffs in just a minute. So I don't see a change happening here in the agreements with Mexico and Canada. And why? Well, Trump just signed this 4 years ago. He just signed this. So it's been in place. These agreements take years to get together. You have to get all these parties together and make big. And I don't see any real changes coming from this. So you're not going to tariff these trucks coming in because you already have a tariff. It's not going to happen. There's just no way. And because you have automakers who spent billions on investments as well. So it's not something I see changing at all. Again, Trump's already been approving of this. So I don't think it's going to happen in the future. Now, with the UAW winning large pay raises from the 2023 strike, it isn't hard to imagine more automakers will production heading to Mexico. It's just going to happen. U.S. automakers have, though, publicly announced millions of investments in U.S. facilities over the past few years. So we heard this with a Jeep plant. GM's done this with different plants. Fort Wayne Assembly as well. You have Ford's done this, and you have Ram has done this with the Sterling Heights assembly plant. They have announced millions in investments. Take that for what it is. So about those tariffs. So one of the things that Donald Trump ran on was leveraging tariffs and taking advantage and getting rid of those imported goods and keep more United States production. So this is an area of focus, especially with regards to China. They do state sponsoring electric vehicles. It has gotten every automaker I've ever seen lately rattled, right? Some people are like, I don't care. My car's better than their car. I'll beat their car. Other people going, holy crap. They built an EV for $10,000. They have like 300 miles of range. I can't compete with that. So there's a lot of conversation going on with this. So currently, President Biden has passed, and he's the current president, just out there, passed 100% tariff on Chinese companies importing vehicles. So we already have a very massive import fee or tariff fee on Chinese built vehicles. So they go after the company and they say, hey, you're building this vehicle, 100% tariff coming to the United States. Donald Trump will just keep this policy in place. It makes total sense. There's really no reason that he has to go back in his campaign pledges to, keep China at bay and all kind of stuff. And I think it's smart business because it's an unfair advantage for China to sponsor these vehicle companies and take away some of their losses by giving them money in exchange. That'll probably be in place. They would also keep in place chicken tax, placing a 25% tariff on imported light-duty trucks. If you don't know what this is, went back into 1964 when signed the law by then President Lyndon B. Johnson. I've actually put this in the story because sometimes I get the presidents messed up in my head. I just want to put it in the story. So he signed this law in place. It did a variety of things importing the United States. They were decimating by the chicken imports and things like this. But the one of the things they wanted to focus on was light-duty trucks. Remember, this is right after, let's see, it's been a couple of years since World War II. You had Korea. You had things going on. and they needed a strong economy. So this gave GM, Ford, and Chrysler an advantage, a hometown advantage. They had a 25% tariff on all vehicles not built here. They kept jobs here. That was really spurring on the growth of automotive industry. This was a good deal for the United States. A huge deal for people that went to work off of the World War II line or off a Korea or Vietnam line, walked right into the plant, got a job, and they were protected by a tariff that stopped other companies coming in. And so an example of this tariff, though, you can see is in the Inuit Grenadier Quartermaster. Now, what is this? If you've never seen this thing, it's I opened a link to this. Jill linked to this stuff. So this is the Inuit Grenadier, and it is a very purpose-built truck, and they make an SUV as well. And you can tell the difference there of the tariff because it really is impactful on the Inuit. The Inuit, the Grenadier wagon, aka the SUV, a pickup are essentially the same vehicle. The SUV just has a bed covering. It's nothing too crazy. They didn't do anything major design differences. The SUV costs $71,500. The truck starts at $88,500. This is largely due to 25% tariff applying only to truck. So Inuit, like most brands with tariffs, they did not absorb the cost of the tariff. They passed on to consumers. So same thing happened to Chinese-built vehicles. You can still sell a Chinese EV in the United States. It just costs 100% more than what you're charging for it for purchase, right? Tariff doesn't keep things away, and tariff doesn't mean that country pays for them, especially in a case like Inuit. Britain's not paying for the tariff. Inuit is paying for the tariff. So I don't see tariffs doing a whole lot more than they've already done in the United States. We have the tariff on Chinese EVs. We'll keep that tariff, and we'll keep the tariff on chicken tax. It's going to stay around. We'll keep the trade agreement with Canada and Mexico because that makes sense from a overall global economy scale or U.S. North American economic scale. It's done some well there. There are criticisms of the agreements we have, but that's what it is. So that's going to stay in place. Now, what about gas prices, interest rates, and new vehicle prices? This is the hot topic item. Somebody said, I can't wait for $1 gas again and all that stuff. And okay, hold on. Let's talk about this. So let's talk about gas prices. Gas prices are a byproduct of oil production, which is oil drilling, production, and then get the marketplace, right? And marketers at gas stations selling stuff. Now, I grew up in the Bush era years where it was drill, baby, drill. And we drilled oil like crazy. And prices, well, didn't always work out that way. And just because of changing dynamics in the marketplace. So let's look at oil production in the United States from 1998 to 2003. Oh, I got to scroll down. Whoa. I zoomed in way too much, guys. Just insert your music here. Let me get rid of this ad so I can see stuff. Okay, oil production, 1998, 2003. So in the past 20-some years, we've seen oil production increase dramatically. It actually increased dramatically right at the beginning of the Obama years. So right when Bush was going through office, Bush pushed a lot of things saying, drill, baby, drill. And they opened up even more lands for drilling. And we see those lands starting to increase. Because here's the thing with oil production that I don't think everybody understands. If just because you drill a well tomorrow doesn't mean on 2 days later, you see lower gas prices. Okay. These things take a long time. There are a lot of permits. There's lots of issues to get involved, to be settled. How do you ship the stuff? Do you have refineries available to refine the raw oil? Can you make it in production? And then a lot of times, especially right now, we've been a net exporter of oil for years. We actually export a lot of oil. And so you see this going all the way up. Actually, it's interesting because Biden never talked about this, which is kind of crazy to me, but his oil production numbers set monthly records. So we have been producing oil a lot. Now we can drill, baby, drill more oil and keep drilling more and producing more oil, but eventually this is not going to pay out into lower gas prices. And the reason for that is because everybody's going to make their money. Okay. So I'll go up a little bit, but you're going to see more oil come to the marketplace. You'll see companies like Shell and others that'll cut back on production as the price gets lower, right? Right now, the average price is $3.10 a gallon. This is down anywhere from 50 to 60 cents from just a year ago. And we can see how much things have changed. And this is kind of my brighter point. You can see how gas has gone from 1990 to 2023, how much has jumped and changed. And this is driven by OPEC, which is the coalition of Middle East countries that has large impact on prices. They have said they can increase oil production. U.S. is doing net export oil production. Gas prices are going down dramatically because now we have more refineries back online. We're producing more oil and we're having more supply in the marketplace. So the problem that I see though is I don't think we'll get back to a dollar gas again because it really bottomed out about $2 on average in 2020 during the COVID, and in 2016 when I believe that was Obama in office, we've seen it down to that level. Because once you get below this $2, get down this range, like I said, oil companies and OPEC reduces oil production. They want to make their money, so they're not going to let you get that cheap without making money because it takes money to make gasoline. So I think you'll see a figure right around the $2 to $3 a gallon. It seems like right in this $2 to $3 a gallon range. I've talked to oil executives and I've talked to consumers. It seems like both sides are happy. Oil executives can make money at $2 to $3 a gallon, and consumers are okay with $2 to $3 a gallon. It seems like both sides, that's the number. So we'll see. It's expected to be by next year, pricing will be back down below $3 a gallon, down to 2.5 a gallon is what we're looking at. So that's with inflation factored in. So if Trump did nothing tomorrow and he gets inaugurated January 6th and he opens up all the drilling in the United States, we drill everywhere. We drill in the backside of Walmart's, drill in the Kmart old parking lots, we drill everywhere. We won't see a decrease in gas prices for a period of time. And then if we have excessive drilling and excessive supply, we'll see oil companies pull back on production like we saw during COVID. So you see how this COVID number changed quite a bit. It went from 2020 to 2021, went up about $50 a gallon. That was because oil companies stopped producing oil. Refineries closed. People in Texas lost their jobs. It's not a great deal. So I don't think we're going to see that come back. And I don't think you should be planning for that. Next is interest rates. Now, these have been dropping throughout, and they will continue to drop throughout 2025. It may return to pre-pandemic levels. This is because the Federal Reserve, which is a non-political group that has no presidential involvement, has been talking about changing interest rates. They cut a half point. They're actually going to cut another quarter point this week. They said throughout 2025, we're going to see more cuts in interest rates as the number gets back to where it was, probably more pre-pandemic levels. And the reason for this is because they feel like they have inflation under control. And they raised rates to reduce inflation, and now inflation is under control, so rates come back down. That is a big deal for, I think, you, the consumer, buying a new truck. And because now you can say to yourself, well, hey, if interest rates go back down and gas is stabilizing next year, maybe I wait next year and save money. Or you say I'm going to buy a truck this year and refinance next year because these interest rates should be going down. Okay. Another thing that'll happen is that you'll see more incentives will be offered on trucks and SUVs. That's because supply is finally building back up. We saw those with Ram and Jeep and Dodge and stuff. They've actually reduced production to control supply because their dealership lots got too heavy with the wrong type of vehicles. They had too many, maybe low end or too many high end. They didn't have the volume sellers in lots, and so they saw sales being decreased. So we'll see a return to incentives. This is what happened in 2017 and 18. It's a very common thing. I mean, it's very rare to play MSRP for vehicles like we have last couple of years. Typically, cash in the hood always sells. It's always a big deal. And then I think you also see that happening with the Section 179 tax code, where you can write off more of the vehicle if you buy a more luxury vehicle. Typically, luxury vehicles have bigger incentives on them, and then you become right set up quicker on a vehicle loan, and then you have more write-off, and everything works together. The used market should see an increase in vehicles as well, as far as that goes, because we're starting to see COVID years starting to be traded in. People are getting bored. The average consumer keeps a car for like 3.5 to 5 years. Trucks between 5 and 7. A lot of consumers they want to buy this truck to keep it forever, and then they come back to me in 4 or 5 years and like, damn it, I'm bored, and they want to buy something else. So it's definitely an impact on overall pricing. I want to make sure I covered everything. I think I did. And then what's the bottom line? What does this really mean for you, the consumer? Oh, I feel like I'm teaching class here. What does it all mean? It means you'll have a better interest rate, lower price, and lower fueling costs if you wait a year. You probably will have more cash in the hood because there's more competition. You'll see more dealership lots that have more supply because supply chain's getting even more straightened out every day. And you should see lower pricing. We've just seen this with the Jeep Grand Wagoneer and Wagoneer. They just dropped by $7,000. We're seeing this with EVs getting massive price cuts. You're going to see lower prices, I think, happening next year. Plus, better interest rates give Americans more buying power. You have more buying power, which means you can negotiate more dealerships, and you're going to say, I want more cash off the hood. Now, interesting enough is that the average transaction price for truck right now, $65,000. It's up again. So this is a massive amount. I think we'll see that come back down as especially inflation, everything's going to cool. It doesn't mean more V8 engines. It's not going to return Ram back to doing a Hemi. That ship has sailed. In their view, they're building a global engine. They see it's more of a premium product, especially the high output engine, and that's what they can do. And GM's going to invest more V8s, but they're going to see more and more electrification. So I think you're going to see that more being a part. You'll see more plug-in hybrid trucks, which is what GM's talked about. You'll see more hybrid trucks like the Ford Power Boost come out. You'll see more hybrid, like in the Toyota Tundra hybrid coming out. You'll see more electrification in trucks. We're going to see more electric trucks. We're going to see that market continue to evolve and grow. I don't think there's going to be any change to the incentive program for EVs, especially with Elon playing a role in things, the CEO of Tesla. I don't see that changing. And Trump did not change anything on EVs last time around. So there's no incentive. That marketplace is still growing at a small rate. It's not overnight success. I don't think it's going to change. It's going to be small amount of consumers who are going to test the waters. Some are going to have bad experiences. Some are going to have great experiences, and you're just going to eventually evolve that stuff. And from a commercial standpoint, commercial operations, I belong to different work truck magazines and everything. That's commercially, they are looking at green vehicles like crazy to meet different emissions goals globally and to save bottom line. One of the costs that happens in a fleet, one of your biggest variable costs is fuel costs. Fuel goes up, fuel goes down. You have this big number going back and forth. If you can control that number with a more consistent number, which is electrification, whether it be an EV, whether it be a hydrogen, natural gas, different powertrain options, you'll have a more consistent fueling cost, which really matters when planning out businesses. So, do I see massive changes with Trump presidency? No, because nothing really changed in the prior presidency. They talked about making changes, and then they did them late in the process. Probably hurt them as well. And then automakers already hit those numbers. There's no incentive for automakers to make many more gains. Consumers, I know people are going to argue with this in the comments. Consumers are buying these vehicles. Sales are still up. Overall, we're still selling quite a few vehicles in the United States, whether it be a non-V8 truck or a diesel truck, whatever. Consumers haven't really voiced their opinion saying they really care about that stuff. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen data yet. Toyota Tundra sales, for example, are setting records for a number of sales going out there. Ram sales are coming back with the new Hurricane engine. People are excited about this. Ford has done really well with EcoBoost right now. Like I said, they have less V8s in the lineup because they do more family EcoBoost engines. And GM is doing a lot with their 2.7 turbo and the 3-liter Duramax diesel. And I think you'll see less V8s from them or more hybrid and plug-in hybrid V8s coming from GM. So I think that's going to be long-term planning, 5, 10, 15 years from now, not in 4 years. 4 years. I think one of the difficulties we have in this country is presidency is 4 years. It seems like a lot of time, but in the grand scheme of things, when you have multinational, multi-trillion-dollar companies, it's a very short amount of time. Okay, this went on way longer than I wanted to. I apologize for that. Hopefully you put me on fast speed. We're changing gear speeds. You can hear it. I'll do this as a podcast as well because I think it's pretty interesting stuff you guys can listen to. Good information out there. I just want to make sure we're all informed consumers. That's my goal on this. I'm not saying one guy's better than the other, one party's better than the other. Frankly, they all have their issues. All I'm saying is be an informed consumer. And if you can wait, you're probably going to do pretty well next year by waiting. If you have to do something this year, like I do, for taxes and things, a lot of good options in the marketplace. For more videos from me in this channel, make sure you come up over here, website down below as well, pickuptrucktalk.com. As always, thanks for watching. I will see you down the road.